I'm going to tell you all who the worst player in Major League Baseball, and actually over the last 2 years, not only this year, and that is the New York Mets' James McCann. I'm going to go through some of his numbers of what he has done, and I'll let you know how much money he is like earning over the next 2 years after this year, and telling you that this is one of the biggest busts in the history of the New York Mets since Jason Bay. Now, if you want to hear this is the kind of channel you want to watch. So please, of course, subscribe to the Baseball Hut. So here we go. We're going to get into this now. Hi, everybody. This is the Baseball Hut, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the people's champion, your host, the Hut. Now, the Mets signed James McCann. One of the first moves they made at the Steve Cohen era was signing James McCann, the catcher, to a 2-year deal. Now, they could have chosen to sign JT Realmuto for when he got 5 years, but they gave James McCann 4 years. Now he was 30 years old at the time. He had been pretty much the first 6 years of his career. He was a backup catcher for the Detroit Tigers. In 2019, he signed with the Chicago White Sox as a free agent and played with them in 2020. He had 2 very good years. And let's go back to the time that he was with the Detroit Tigers. He played for them for 5 years. Okay? He was essentially, he had a lot of at-bats, but really he was a glorified backup catcher for some really bad Detroit Tiger teams. Some really bad ones. Over the course of his career during that time, he was a .240 hitter with 288, get this, 288 on-base percentage, 366 slugging percentage, over 452 games, 1,658 at-bats. His OPS was 653, and his OPS plus. Now, OPS plus is the measure that they have for major league players offensively. So if a player is at 100, that is average. His number as an offensive player with the Detroit Tigers was 76. So he was 24 points under that number with the Detroit Tigers from 2014 to 2018. His best year with the Tigers was 2017 when he had 13 home runs and 49 RBIs, and his OPS plus was 94. And his OPS was 733. And it was a 253 hitter. Now, for some odd reason, in 2019, he made the All-Star team. Let me read you some of his numbers based off of his offensive productivity. The productivity in 2019 and 2020 is very high, but it was sort of a bit of a mirage, I would think. In 2019, he had 26 doubles, 18 home runs, and 60 RBIs. That's not bad for a catcher. His OPS plus was 108, so he's 8% better than the average major leaguer. And his OPS was 789. So he had a very good year that year. And in 2020, in the short season, he only played 31 games out of 60. So he basically missed half the season because they had Yasmani Grandal with the White Sox. 7 home runs, 15 RBIs, 289 batting average, OPS of 896, and 143 is OPS plus. So he was 43% better than the average major league, but it was over 31 games. Based off of those 2 years, the Mets signed him with this idea that he had changed his swing in terms of the launch angle. He was swinging more upward. He became more of an uppercut hitter. Now, the problem now with that, now, as you know, especially early on in this season in particular, the ball's not traveling like it did. And there's not a rabbit in the baseball now. So because there's no rabbit in the baseball, his numbers are basically kaput. So in 2021, his first year with the New York Mets, James McCann hit 232. His on-base percentage was .294. His slugging percentage was a disgustingly woeful .349. These three numbers, except for two of these three numbers, was well below. Well, all three numbers. I'm sorry. All three numbers are well below his career average. His OPS in 2021 with the New York Mets was .643. 35 points lower than his career average now. His OPS plus in 2021 for the New York Mets, as the primary catcher on this team, was 76. So he was 24% lower than he was to the average major leaguer. This year, 2022. Now he's missed time because he broke his thumb early in the season, and he had a bit of a back lat strain, oblique strain, whatever it was. I would point out that I haven't even gotten into his catch. I would give him kudos that he caught the no-hitter back in April. He was the catcher in April. But here are his offensive numbers. The worst of his career, the worst across the board on every number that he has ever produced in his career as a major league player. and his OPS is at his lowest. In 41 games, he's got 2 home runs, 13 RBIs. He's walked 5 times and struck out 30. 30 out of 27 plate appearances. That is 25% of his at-bats has ended in a strikeout. His batting average is .181. His on-base percentage, .236. His slugging percentage, .267, with only 6 extra base hits and 116 at-bats. His OPS, .503. The average for most major leaguers, if they're good or even average, is .700. His OPS plus is a horrific .44. He's got 31 total bases. Terrible. I haven't even gotten into his catching, which is more of an eye thing, and I'm sure there's numbers out there that talk about his catching. There was a number out there because he caught Max Scherzer on Monday. Max Scherzer's ERA in his 4 starts as the catcher is over 4. And the other 8 games that Max Scherzer has pitched for the New York Mets, with Tomas Nido as the catcher, his ERA is under 2. So he is making players worse. He's making his pitching staff worse. And he's made his ace worse by him being the catcher. And obviously there was some sort of communications problem between Scherzer and McCann. Also, his offense has been so bad that you can't trust him in a big spot. On the other hand, you have Tomas Nido, whose numbers overall are just as bad as McCann's, but a couple of things about Nido. He's hitting over .290 late in the game from the 7th with men on base, as well as he leads the league. He leads the National League in sacrifice bunts with 12. So he is contributing something with the bat. Also, to tell you how much Buck Showalter does not like his catching, the Mets are now carrying a third catcher in Michael Perez. Michael Perez caught 3 of the 4 games in Philadelphia, and the 3 out of 4 games the Mets won against the Phillies. James McCann is terrible at catching the ball that's thrown to him, which seems to be the primary number one thing that you want your catcher to be. But he constantly taking in pass balls, constantly taking in wild pitches. He's terrible at blocking balls in the dirt. He's one of the worst catchers we've seen really since Wilson Ramos. He's not much better than Wilson Ramos, except he does one thing that makes people forget about his overall game. He's got a great arm. That arm is about as good as I've seen with any team this year in the National League when it comes to behind the plate. He'll throw out any runner, standing up on his knees. Any way he can get a guy out, he gets him out. But everything else about his game is trash. Sorry. I hate to be so rough, but that's just how it is. Like I said, James McCann is the worst player in Major League Baseball. He's probably the worst, certainly one of the worst catchers in the game. And he still has money coming to him after this year. He's got 2 more years on his long contract that he signed with the Mets, the 4-year contract. In 2023 and 2024, the Mets owe him $12.15 million per year. So that's $24.25 million with get this, over a 24. Let's say that there was another year, but he's got 2 more years on his contract. The Mets have a young catcher named Francisco Alvarez. Alvarez right now is kind of struggling in AAA as we speak. He's not quite ready yet. But it'll be interesting to see what the Mets decide to do in the offseason. Do they move him? They're not going to release him now. They're not DFAing him. Anybody, please don't leave a comment saying they need to get rid of him now. That's not going to happen. But I just want to point out how bad he's been, just going through some of his numbers and just letting you know how much more they have left in terms of the years on his contract. So he's got 2 more years after this at over almost $25 million. So it's a lot of money for a guy that's really quite horrific. But there is help on the way. It's on the horizon. Because if it isn't Francisco Alvarez that's going to help them in the future, it'll be Kevin Parada. So, thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think about it. Please subscribe to the Baseball Hut. Thank you, and I'll see you later.
1-2 coming. On the inside corner, Melanson down and looking, and McCann is hot. And he's been thrown out of the game. This is the first...